All right, welcome everyone to another episode of 123 Chess. My name is Luke,
I'm Tom.
and we're here today to do something that I would arguably say at least 90% of chess players, or at least the recreational that want to kind of improve ones, don't do. So, pretty stoked about this. Without further ado, we have the board. We're going to go back to our game from last week, and we're going to kind of go move by move, taking you through what was in our minds, a little bit of interaction, and then straight into what we're going to be analyzing.
So starting off here, we started with me playing e4. This is my usual opening move. Luke went to e5 in response. This is a book opening. So then I moved to d4. This is center game. And that's accepted. Pawn takes. And then bringing this out here, I'm moving in toward the Danish Gambit. And that is declining there. We're on d3. 3, okay. Feel free to jump in, Luke, if you...
Yeah, I was going to say, so I put, my acronym is Scout E. The U stands for uncomfortable. So the C3 third move was for me very uncomfortable because, as we mentioned before, I tend to like positional chess, whereas Tom is more into tactical threads. So he likes to blast open the position where I like to keep it kind of concealed. So for me, it's very uncomfortable for me to get to this place where now it's wide open with at least a semi game going for us.
And just to kind of get into that, that's a little bit of what this move does in general. You're immediately putting, as white, your opponent into this position of opening up the game. If they take that, then you're going to start to get more open lines. I mean, you could probably get into some scenarios where, you know, they didn't take it and they were just developing material, and maybe you get this pawn moving forward one and you close off the game a little bit. But a lot of that is in white's hands to be able to manipulate. And when I'm going for those open games, that's kind of what I'm trying to force.
Yep.
There we go. So my knight's coming out. And we're making it to 6 castle. And this is actually the first one that I put down as I was a little uncertain.
Okay.
For castling. And I think generally I do feel uncomfortable when I castle. I know, like, I always know the approximate time that I need to be castling.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you don't want to do it too late. If you do it too late, you can get burned and not be able to do it. But if you do it early, you can also lose your momentum that you're gathering for your attack. And I think that's something that's hard for me too, especially playing the more aggressive games that I do. As I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that tempo that I've built up at the start of the game by castling too soon. And I mean, certainly the engine here is saying that I was a little too soon, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That was something I was looking into.
I also want to briefly mention here that, you know, for all of you guys who, I know I'm very guilty of this in the past, is you instantly want to run it by a chess engine. I want to caution you strongly, do not do that. Every single book that really teaches, if you want to actually get better in chess and you honestly want to learn from your mistakes, you just can't hit the chess engine. And I know it auto does it for most websites like chess.com. That's great and all, but wait till you do all of what we're going to show you. before you get to that stage, or you just, the gems you will not find of how to actually learn from yourself.
All right, and then we're on 7.
So real quickly, this for me was my first critical moment. I felt particularly uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure if I should play bishop takes e3 or disregard it altogether. I ended up choosing the bishop b6, and you know, it's a sort of thing where, I mean, I couldn't help but wonder if that created the increasing weakness for me throughout the game as the pressure mounted against my king side, and my opponent maintained a notable tempo advantage. So really, that movie. Now, again, if you look at the chess analysis here of this engine, it's telling you it's a mistake. I'm disregarding that, but I'm just telling you what was going through my mind. It was noteworthy that I felt very uncomfortable. I didn't want to get my pawns doubled. But what happened is that caused me to focus on defending, and I had no offensive plan.
And I'll say too, when I moved here, one of the things that this is kind of one of those moments in the game, critical moments in the game, where I'm starting to move toward more of an offense. And oftentimes when I'm bringing those pieces out, developing like that bishop there, prior to this, even having made that comment on the castle, I felt pretty secure in the placement of all of my pieces. I dropped that bishop there, and that I was a little uncertain about.
Yeah.
In terms of my placement, because I mean, the reason why I ultimately went there was because, if I did have that exchange, then I'm going to end up recapturing with this pawn here.
Yep.
And when I do, it opens up the file for, it opens up the file for my rook. And that was my logic behind the move. But off the top of my head, I don't know that moving there would have been bad. I'm usually a little bit more hesitant in my older years to bring it that far up to this square. It is protected by the knight, but it's less focused on the center of the board. And so it's pretty easily deflected.
Yeah. And I think for me, a lot of times when you bring the bishop out to the to the 5th rank, as it were, I think I think it's easy to remind yourself that it's going to inevitably probably be back in the 3rd rank.
Yeah.
Like to push it to the 5th rank is going to be 2 moves to the 3rd rank, and it's because if once they decide, oh, I'm going to push it with the pawns or trade off, either way, you're going to either get to the 3rd rank or you're going to trade it. I mean, I know that's not always the case, but a lot of things I read, it's kind of, that just needs to be a mindset of always a part of the process of decision.
That usually bumps out, knocking it back to this square, and then this pawn comes out to here.
Yeah.
And your bishop ends up right there.
Okay.
That goes there. So I bring my knight out, developing it, connecting my back row. And this was a move that I definitely felt a little unsure of. Again, I'm moving into an attack at this point in time. I've got my tempo. I want to be working on an attack.
Yep.
And in our previous video, I said I was moving this one out because it's creating more places for my white squared bishop to go, which gives me options, but it just didn't do a lot to maintain that tempo. And I feel like this would have been a better time to be working more toward a solid attack.
Agreed. Yeah, it didn't really do much for you. Okay, brings the queen into the action. So that move, as soon as I made my knight go on e5, that was where I felt uncomfortable. This is one of those, after I moved it, I kind of reassessed and I'm like, because I wanted to make sure that the e4 pawn stays there to block the bishop and queen, because I just saw you move your queen. So I know what you had in mind. But I'm also nervous because if knight takes e5, it'll allow you to start pushing the f pawn to open up. So it's almost like trying to put a band-aid on a wound, on a gaping wound, as the terrible saying goes. Because like, really, what did I really intend to accomplish with that? Now I have a pawn that's kind of out in his own, and what's gonna happen next? I should have remembered that you're gonna just push the f pawn. As soon as your knight's out of the way, you're gonna push the f pawn, then you're opening up your rook and the attack becomes much and much more pronounced. So that was, for me, that was a key moment of where I just kind of didn't think before I moved. And that was one of my three that I chose, actually, was knight e5. The only other thing I said was, because this response was kind of a given that you were going to take it. And it's the move, and this move right here, I mean, as you know, this is what opened up the game. It opened up the game and the f file for the rook, and I feel like the move was it basically started my mid-game disadvantage. So now we have the d file open, and soon to be the f file.
Yeah, and I moved this king out of the way, and I did say in retrospect, I think a better plan would have been to capture his bishop there.
Yeah.
Because then the doubled pawns goes on Luke, and opens the way for me to bring that pawn forward, attacking that middle square with that line with my rook.
Yeah.
But I moved out of the way.
Yep.
And he took.
And again, this was my fear. Sure, you have doubled pawns, but at the same time, you have a rook open. So it's kind of, it's one of those things you have to weigh the odds. And in this case, as you'll see the game progressing here, it turned out a lot more challenging for me to keep my king side defended.
And this was a move that I think was a little short-sighted on my part. I moved here with the idea of, oh, well, I'm attacking that pawn, which currently is undefended. But I think one of the things that I have a tendency to do sometimes, that the purpose of this is really helping me, is to slow things down of, okay, I can attack that undefended pawn, but what's the board state going to look like next move? Because he's not just going to say, okay, take that pawn. He does what honestly was like a pretty obvious move, like move that knight to a position where it's being defended now. And now I start to feel really uncomfortable, because now I'm looking at the board state. This pawn right here can't go anywhere because it's got a pawn blocking it. And then this bishop here, I had that in line with the queen, with this entire tension of like, I'm bearing down on that pawn there, but with that pawn blocking it, I've got like, it's just, there's nothing. I've got no movement there. All right, so I was just very disappointed in not being able to do this attack anymore. This one's obviously blocked off now. So I ended up saying I need to move this bishop. I needed to get that bishop activated again.
Yep.
He just wasn't doing anything. And so that's why I end up pulling my knight back, just giving me the option to move anywhere down that diagonal with the bishop.
I want to mention here too, I find it very interesting how this moment is when you were feeling very uncomfortable, which was a lot in part for due to the doubled pawns. But I was also feeling very uncomfortable here, particularly because not only had I moved my knight back, but I also was intending to have that file open for my queen and some other stuff I was working on. But this just totally, and I don't like it how now your rook is still eyeing down that column. So I just find it interesting how this was a key moment for both of us where we were feeling really uncomfortable, not really realizing what our positional advantage was in other ways,
Yeah.
which I'll get into shortly in a couple moves.
So then he moved up there. And like I said, I'd been trying to activate that bishop, and there was my opportunity to activate the bishop.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
oh no, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I'm offering that exchange up there with that bishop, because then I had full intention of bringing my knight out there, and now it's in a much, if I can get my knight out there without that bishop there, I'd be in a much nicer position.
Yeah. And this is where I have to say that move is also one of my 3 moves I picked, because when you moved bishop c4, it appeared to be a key forcing move. But if I had done on my move in response here, as you know, my move in response was queen e7. But what I didn't realize is I started looking at it more deeply, and I realized if I had done bishop take c4, then move 17 could have been knight take c4, queen d2. This would have put me on the offense with a very active queen and knight, and possibly allowing me to win the e4 pawn and stack up my rooks on the d file. So this point in the game, the closer I looked here, I had some real key opportunity that I did not use at all, because the trade-off here was really, it could have possibly gone in my favor if I had played it out correctly.
And what were you saying at this point, Luke? So
Yeah, so if I
you
so
pull your
if I
queen out there.
yeah, so if I did on my 16th move response, if I did bishop takes c4, and then you did knight takes c4, so now then your knight would be there, and then I did queen d2.
Queen d2. D2?
Or wait, was it d2? It must have been, wait, take, yeah, no, d3, that must have been it. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
I
it's
said
protected
d3.
there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So because the idea there was, I could have, I don't know, that maybe I was getting a little confused, but it's definitely one I want to study, because this right here opens up a lot of stuff, and which trade you do and how your pieces work together is a pretty crucial element.
Yeah, that certainly would have cleared off a lot of stuff on the board at that point. It's definitely very, very aggressive.
Yeah. So, yeah, so that's all I had for that one.
Okay. So he didn't do the exchange, so I did the exchange. My bishop wasn't doing a heck of a lot there anymore, so trading off the bishops seemed like a good way to go for me.
And right there, okay, Queen takes now again. I understand that I didn't want my pawns doubled. I understand that, but this is where I learned a lot about myself. Along with, I would say, the vast majority, or at least a good portion of, beginner slash intermediate players before tournament level, most of us tend to think of things like principles as too overrated. So doubled pawns here, while that would have not necessarily been great for me, it would have instantly opened my rook up so that I would be contending for the F file, which is a very crucial file right now. And it also would actually put the pressure on Tom so that his rook would have had to decide if it wanted to continue to contend, and his other rook now is stuck guarding it. I mean, I know he has the knight there, but that's temporary too. So I just feel like if we were to play this again, at this point, I would have probably taken it with the pawn instead of with my queen.
And so going back to the F file, I jump on the F file because I do have really good control over it with that move there, just getting my knight into the game. I'll move 18 here. Oh, and that was another thing. I want to continue to attack this e pawn here. Because right now that's what his queen is dedicated to doing.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Taking the open file. And I don't want to give him control of that, just like we talked for those files with the rooks.
And see, this move here, like, what did that really do for me? I mean, I know why I did it, because I was trying to prevent his knight from going over there, but why so easily without sweating did I weaken my kingside position? That just does not do much for my overall positionary advantage. If I had any positional advantage at all, I didn't at this point.
And then I bring out that pawn there, which I felt great about bringing that pawn out.
Okay, so if those of you guys who watched our other video, you know that this is one of those I just feel like smashing my head on a table, because why on God's green earth did I not see that coming? I mean, this goes back to what I said before, which is why I wanted to study move 16, because my knight had strong positional possibilities there. I mean, as you guys know, the square in the middle of the board, which, the 4x4 square, that's where your knights want to be. And I had really, especially because I had it eyeing that other pawn on his, E4 square the whole time. So, given a little bit of coordination with my rook and queen, I could have really done something with my knight. But as it stands, because I didn't, he's just begging to be kicked. It's exactly what Tom did.
Couldn't go there, couldn't go there. Couldn't go there because of the queen. He's blocked himself in there. I would say the surprising one for me, though, Luke, was I was really expecting you to move to this square.
Yeah. I almost did, but the reasoning behind me not is because where would he go from there? Because as soon as I did that, if I were you, I probably would have done something like push the C pawn, like advance that to C4, and now my knight's totally stuck.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of, like, by moving it back, I was able to possibly move another pawn up to give it a spot in the C file or something like that.
Sure.
So if I moved, like, C7 to C6, then I could have moved it there and possibly meandered my queen. I don't know. At this point, again, I wasn't really thinking through the implications. Not to beat a dead horse. Beat a dead knight.
And so this is just kind of me preparing to get this rook back there, so I've got the doubled rooks in the single file. And then this, 2 moves after my move that I felt so solid about, I did this, and I didn't feel like it did that much. Again, I think this goes to, not really thinking about what I'm doing, like how, yeah, this was an attack. I did this with the intention of like, okay, well, if I can get to that square right there, if I can get to F5 with that knight, that's going to be a great place to camp out. He's going to have to move his rook. But the thing is like, that's not going to happen. Luke's not going to just let me camp out with my knight there. And so he did, the obvious move there, which is move that knight forward to defend the F5 square, which, I was okay with, thinking to myself, well, I'm doing more to weaken his kingside pawn structure. But the problem is now my next move, I got to get that knight back into the game, and now I'm in the same position that I was before, but now it's not my turn anymore. I've lost the momentum.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all I was going to say too, is I just think that the obvious thing that any intermediate player like us would know is that, it's essentially causing my kingside pawn structure to be a little bit weakened. But as Tom said, I just think that I don't really think that did much. I think it just kind of was kind of an in-between move, deciding what to do next.
And then it gives him the opportunity to, double up those rooks before I get the opportunity to. And, I obviously still did.
Yeah.
And then Luke takes here. Upon taking, I've got to take.
Yep. Notice how I'm really prudent. I'm very cautious of just taking it because I'm wanting multiple options to take it. I'm essentially, my mindset here was trying to double my options. I was trying to have either a pawn or a queen to take it. What I failed to realize is that if you play out these options, one of the two of them, because there's only two, was not a good option. So my thought process was a little bit invalid, though I had an intention of creating more possibilities.
And then I bring my knight to d2, which actually I think something that's interesting back in this entire thing. We're talking about Luke being, preferring those positional games. The funny thing is, I don't know if you thought about this at all, Luke, but if you hadn't initiated that exchange there, I wouldn't have been able to bring my knight down to get it into the game.
Yeah.
And I really would have struggled to get it back onto that side of the board, which is why I was a little stuck. I was a little stuck until the exchange.
I didn't think about that. That's a good point. I should have. That's a really, really good point.
And then from here.
So we were on move 26. Yeah. I mean, this right here was, again, it's no surprise. This was kind of the beginning of the breakdown of my defenses. So yeah, that was kind of the idea.
Oh, and this was one. This is something that I catch myself into, and it's much easier to do with games like what we were doing, which was a 15-minute time game versus one where you've got a day to make a move. But I wrote down in here that my move number 27, this one here, I prevented myself from blundering because I really wanted to. My initial thought was, oh well, I'm gonna move that knight there.
Yep, and I did see that, so I was kind of holding out, hoping you would miss it, but
Yep. Yeah, the computer didn't like that move either. So the thing is, just to get everybody on the same page with us, if I had moved there, then Luke could have facilitated that exchange, taking. And what do I do now? So capture that material. Okay, I recapture that material, but then darn.
Yep, that was one of the few tactics in this game that I saw coming.
So instead, I prevented the blunder by just saying, okay, I'm gonna simplify it, take a look.
Yep, that was pretty solid. So yeah, go ahead with that one. My next one.
This was one of my this was a really nice move for me. That it was once everything opened up there, it was like, oh, duh, like bring that pawn out, get it into action.
Yeah, exactly. Break it open. I have no defense in that side, so why not? Okay, so so knight b8. This allowed your pawns to take control of my queen side and break through my defenses. So if you didn't end up trading queens a couple moves later, I think I don't know. I think that what I wrote on this one is I said I think he could have better capitalized if he didn't end up trading queens. I think, I don't know. I think it could have been better capitalized on the mistake because as we see the next couple moves here, which we can go to, unless you want to say something about that one.
And that one right there. Honestly, this was me just being too excited and moving too fast. Because I got here.
Yep.
I was like, boom, I've got this pawn charging forward. His queen's there.
Yep.
I'm doing an attack into the queen. I want to take a little bit more control of that board.
Yep.
I've got this square with that pawn, this square, and now I'm attacking that square. I'm like, oh, look at all those squares that I'm attacking right down the middle of the board. I felt good about it. Just totally ignoring the fact, oh, that's a free pawn there that I could have taken.
And that would have opened up a place for your knight. That's the real gem behind it. I mean, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Nope. But instead, charging forward with that pawn.
It's a cool looking pawn structure, but hey, it didn't,
It was like, that pawn structure looks really cool if I do it that way.
Right.
And, I accomplished what I was going for, which was getting the queen out of the file.
And I want to point out here that this whole time, what is my concern? My concern is that diagonal, that white diagonal, is right open to my king. And so I had this challenge. Now you can see, those of you who have really followed us through the way through, you can really see here, my two main weaknesses are just crying out to me. I have the whole D file open with no defense, and I have the white diagonal. And I can't cover both at the same time. So what do? I just kind of sit my queen there in the middle trying to cover both, and it's not really doing much for me. And there he goes.
And there you go.
Yep. So, and that's probably what I would have done too. I mean, you could have gone for the trade, but why when you have such a positional advantage? Which brings me to the next key point for me, because on this next move, that was my last hope. I was like, if I'm going to have any chance, given the position, I have to trade queens. And to my surprise, what did Tom do?
Yeah. I mean, now looking at that, this is such an obvious move.
Yeah, it would have been perfect.
So there, boom, you're in check.
Yep.
You've got to do the trade at that point, right?
I honestly...
Maybe move your queen there.
Yeah. I think the trade is probably necessary, But either way, yeah, like if you did that, anything other than just taking my queen, because that was what I wanted you to do, and it also opened my knight back.
Yeah, I got your knight right back into the game.
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
I was excited about that one.
Yeah, I mean the thing is too, if we had gone here, you had taken that, then boom, look at that. I mean, look at that pawn structure. I got rid of my doubled pawns.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Or on this side, that would have been beautiful, and then that's a nice spot for my knight to be moving up.
Now, some of you guys may have heard the terminology outposts for knights. The idea being the knight can have a safe haven to rest on a really powerful square with much potential. Usually what that means is that there's a pawn of yours that's guarding it, or a lesser piece. And so in this case, a pawn can also serve the purpose like he just showed. A lot of times the better thing to do is to let the other person decide, and if they do decide, then you get, like Tom said, doubled pawns, or a pawn duo, which is super powerful in the middle.
So knight comes out. We're on 32 here. Mm-hmm. And this is actually one of the moves that I wrote down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this is really this is where we're definitely moving into the end game here. Yep. All the major pieces are really cleared off the board. We're even in material. I like this side of the board a little bit better for me. I think Luke has a little bit better on the king side of the board, especially because I've got these doubled pawns. And I was just so unsure about like how the heck do I want to start this attack. I know I've got to get moving. I felt like, okay, well, I've got these pawns are a little bit more active on my queen side here. So I was envisioning, you know, okay, I can get this knight up here and then start jumping all sorts of around to get to his pawns. But the thing is, I started to realize, and you'll see this going on, that if you think about all the jumping that's going to have to go on for that, he is going to be able to just dodge by small moves with his pawns. And it would have been maddening to try to chase those with that knight. And so that's what I started to get really concerned about, especially when I see him moving his king up, because then, you know, it instantly goes in my head, yeah, Luke, you're probably right. I got to get this king into the game.
So that puts me a tempo ahead of you with king development.
Yep. And I do this, which is actually like that's me getting my king into the game.
Yeah.
Because I'm opening the move to go to G2 next turn.
Now, I want to point out something here. Normally, a beginner would look at this once they learn about the double pawns thing. Again, don't underestimate, but don't overestimate principles. In this case, the fact that I offered him to get rid of his double pawns, what did that do? It gave me a pawn duo. So in that case, when I weighed the odds, you know, they were in my favor in the end. And it also further, you know, gave further options for my king. So really what that did for me is it gave me a crucial positional advantage on the king side.
So again, like I said, I needed to bring my king up, so that's what that move is. Really I mean, the idea is you want to get your king into those middle squares.
Yep.
Going for it.
Not so sure about that one. I re-looked at that one after I got done playing, and I don't really know what that did for me. I think that was a little premature.
So I know we're ignoring the chess engine, Luke, but this is one that was that blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
is the engine telling me to do that move here? Because
Yeah.
I've been sitting here thinking, like, I had abandoned all hope in that plan, thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to take so long to get happen over there.
Yeah.
And now suddenly the engine's like, oh, it seems like a good time to do it.
Yeah, and that again, this goes to the fact that if I mean, look, we would get caught with a red herring if we just went along with that really deeply. When in actuality, a lot of these other things we're discussing, if we just look at a chess engine, we wouldn't even have talked about half of this stuff because we would have
No.
bypassed it. We would have not learned about our shortcomings as our own mindset was. Okay, getting
And
in the middle.
getting that king in the middle. And that's where I was. So this side of the board is clearly where all of the action is happening. I gave up on this plan a long time ago. And so I need my knight to get into the game, which is why I bring it back here.
And this is getting to be the point of the game where I start to have a little bit of the upper hand in position.
And again, that comes from him getting into that center area first with his king.
Okay.
And I don't know. It was probably timid on my part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little bit where I am in end games.
What was your logic behind it?
My logic behind it was honestly just I didn't think that this was going to work out favorably for me in the exchange. I mean, because that's that's what I'm envisioning in my head, right?
Yep.
Which would have been obviously bad playing had I done that. And that's the blunder there.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, you've got such a strong presence there in the middle. I can't attack into it with my king. And so going from here, I just would have felt so on defensive, right? And just waiting for you to force that king out of there and bringing those pawns down. I think that was my primary concern. I mean, I guess looking at this position now, like having those two pawns over there would have been really nice, because you've got the one pawn and these two pawns are doubled up now.
Yeah,
that might have been a nice way to go. But again, I was timid, and I pulled my knight back, or I pulled my king back.
Okay, now this is coming to a crucial point in the game here, which is one of my three moves I picked. So obviously right now, what am I intending here? I'm intending him to make the decision, does he want to trade knights? That has implications for the rest of the game. So the beginning, I mean, this right here, what is it? After it's taken and then taken again, this is now a full-fledged knight, king and pawns endgame. And right here, the thing I mentioned when I was playing before, so this is something called the opposition, where in the endgame strategy, the idea is your king can only cover 3 squares in front of him, the 2 diagonal and 1 vertical. And so the idea here is that let's even take the pawn away, theoretically, from in between us. Either way, his king cannot move on any of those 3. He cannot push in any offensive manner. So that right there is a positional advantage for me, called opposition.
So with that same principle, I absolutely did not want for Luke to get that F3 square, right? So if I move that way because of opposition, boom, it's there now, and I'm done. Yep. Like I couldn't recover from that position. So I said, okay, I want to make sure I'm covering that square, which is why I dance over there.
Now, now here, what was I doing? And again, if you go back to the game, I was thinking, okay, look, I have extra moves. The problem is, what happens when I use those extra moves up? Because they don't do anything for me. And while it makes sense why my mind was going there, I failed to realize what about what then? What then? You know, so there we go. Now they're used up and we're back to where we were. It didn't do anything for me. And what I should have done is more closely analyze the position where the action is. So I'm like, okay, let's do something different. Now this, I still need to study more because there's a lot that can happen if you play it out. So
Well, and it's funny because I think both of us like saw this happen, and we were like, "Oh my gosh!" Like
what then?
that might be the game.
Yeah.
Because again, like I had just been trying to control that F3 square, and Luke let me have it.
Yep.
So I was happy as a clam.
Yep.
But there was still stuff to be done.
Now this is really interesting. So I know what did happen next, but what do you think was your best option here? Because the
My
next
best
move,
option.
yeah, like the next move was played e4. Yeah.
Yep.
So then again, the question is, so essentially that was your best move. And
Yeah.
so then here's the thing I failed to realize. If you really think about it, so what I ended up playing here is f takes e4 check, which totally gave him the whole reign of the middle. But
Yep.
what happens if I instead moved my king to d4? Now it seems superficially like, oh, Tom can go push his pawn. But guess what? Then if I push my pawn, now I check him in the process, which gives me an advantage that I did not see.
Yeah.
That right there could have, I mean,
I think the only thing is though, in this position, I bring my king back, and because of opposition, you're not going to be able to get through. And I've got those three connected
no,
pawns.
I think you still would have had it, but yeah, it all goes back to why did I make my king lose the opposition in the first place?
Well, I think going from here, I
It should
bring.
have been a draw, possibly.
Um, Instead of taking, I like the idea of bringing your king up here. But then I take, and I feel like
The only option I would have had is to push my pawn to check you.
yeah, you've had to push the pawn check.
That's the
Well,
only thing.
you couldn't. No, you couldn't have raced.
No, you would have still dominated the middle. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting selection of possibilities. I think it all goes back to when I had opposition, when I had my king on e4, I should have kept it. I should have just danced back and forth with you, forced the draw, because you had an advantage over me at that point.
What was the engine saying was your best move here? Do you know? Oh, it was right here. It's the same move to.
That's a good question. I'll have to look back and revisit that one a little bit more in depth.
It's saying D3 right there.
Ah, okay. Oh yeah, because you know what? You're right. I said d4. Yeah, you're right. Because then I'm already one step further, and I have opposition too with check.
That's what it is. Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah. Because you do that, I get that, but now you get check.
Yeah.
And I can't move that E2.
That's what it was. Yes. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Yes, that is beautiful there, because at this point in time, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I would do. I can't, because even if I come down here I can't stop you from getting that queen pass.
Yeah.
We're there. I mean, I've got first move with my pawn.
But I have it with check.
But you have it with check, so it's going to be, and you're going to be putting me in check the entire time you're moving on down. So,
yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a really nice move.
Yeah. So that was certainly a key point. Yeah. So obviously at this point I knew that he was going to have, he was going to get a pawn queen first. There was no doubt about that. So
this was interesting too. I hadn't thought about this, but in analyzing the game afterward, this was really a wasted move on my part.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I really should have just gone straight to this.
Yep.
Because that pawn's stuck behind the king anymore, and I'm going to get one of those pawns through. But
absolutely.
wasted move. And then we're just gobbling up pawns, getting these through.
Okay, now here I want to point out something really important. For beginner players, they would have not realized that, as exemplified in my beginner-like style in this move, okay, let's look at the facts, shall we? Once his pawn gets to g8 and turns into a queen, it's going to control the whole diagonal. What I should have done is move my king up a bit so it could have gotten closer. If I would have tried to get my king at least to already to b3, then I could move forward. Now my pawn's a lot closer. So again, I understand that wouldn't have really given me the upper hand in any way. But at least, like, come on, like, now my king is stuck. I should have seen that, and I totally didn't even look for it.
And at this point in time, I'm feeling like incredible. Like, I've got this.
Yeah.
That move there, that one really surprised me, Luke. You taking that? Just because it allowed me to come down there.
Yeah, I just, blunder after blunder here for me was the name of the game.
But then I just fall apart, and I'm like, okay, what the hell am I doing? And this is where I spent a lot of time looking at this game already. Was looking at how did I screw up this ending so badly.
We've all been there.
We're on 56
a million times. If I had $1 for every time I did this kind of thing, I'd be
I'm
too rich.
I'm just thinking to myself, like, okay, I want to get my king involved. That's why I'm bringing him there. And that one, I was like, okay, great, I'll take that pawn. My king's in check. And I'm feeling like, well, this is weird. Because I'm feeling like, God, what is happening? I feel like I'm on the defensive still, even though I'm the one with the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And I do this awful move here. In this, I felt really solid. Okay, I'm good here. He can't advance that pawn anymore. His king is really shut down. He can't advance either one of those pawns. Felt great. And this is when I was like, okay, I'm getting my king into this game, building that opposition that we've talked about, right?
Yep.
And then I do that. It was not a wise choice.
Is now again, let's if we could back up real quickly, because one of the key elements in this game is a queen king endgame, and this is the kind of thing that I know myself, and I could probably speak for any of you out there who are intermediate players like us. This is something that needs to be textbook memorized in what the principles are for you to maintain the authority.
Yep. Because doing that right there, the game is over there. Mm-hmm. Because he's got nowhere to move the pawn, protect his king. If I had just taken with that king, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
If he's got two moves, he could do that, or he could do that. And one, he loses the pawn, and the other is checkmate.
I mean, but this just goes to show you, solid chess is not made up of an incredible game. Solid chess is made up of individual moves, prudently decided, one after another as they come. It's you don't have to look a million moves ahead, but it's the sort of thing. This can happen to any of us, and does. Just giving it little things.
What was really funny too is this was like the moment in the game where I was like, okay, and now when you get to this moment, this is in our last video. When you get this moment, really think about what you're doing. Rush things. You don't rush things and screw things up. And then I do that. Which the game is not lost here. The game is not lost, but I
No,
just didn't win it.
right.
Um, and then I'm doing this. You just keep moving that down. I started thinking you're following this pattern. Like, what am I just gonna do this forever? Where I do this, and I just keep going back and forth. Right, move my queen down, put you in check, and then we just go back and forth. So obviously that's not something I can do. So king involvement, right? King is key. Still gets to move it forward. I said I'm done. I am done with it at this point. I need to get this under control, get my queen in front, which honestly would have been a solid strategy way back here. If I had done this, he moves there, and I move my queen down here. Again, it's game over once I put my queen there.
And this can almost go without being said, but just to clarify, for all you guys who struggle with these types of endgames, the principle of getting your queen to block the pawn that's being pushed, that is the key. So if you can get your queen to B1 at some point, it doesn't matter where, and then you give yourself an extra move to move the king closer. And then it's a dance of moves so that you can constantly check till you get your queen back there, then move the king up again. Then dance of moves, get your queen back there, king up again. And that's kind of the idea.
So then I go into this. I can't let his pawn get any closer. Like, legitimately, it can't go any closer, because if he does, he gets the queen. So I just have to continuously get him in check. And then I get the king there, and I'm like, boom, that's exactly what I needed to do. And you hear us in the previous video saying, that's what I needed to do. That's what I need to do. Then I move my king up.
That's solid.
King involved in the game. He moves there. And I think this is where I said, I'm done. I throw in the towel. I just lose. But I hadn't. I lost by doing that, or I tied the game by doing that. I threw in the towel. And if you have a moment, pause the video here and really look at the position. Because there's a really good position to look at and be like, okay, how do I get the win here? Where is it?
And I want to point out, again, this can almost go without being said too, but if Tom had moved his king instead of to C4 to D4, think about it. It would have given, if he moved it to D4, now he can move the queen there to check.
Yes.
So that, again, it's just little things about keeping the space open and keeping the pieces working together. And yeah.
That was the blunder. The move to do was that one right there.
Because it pins him. Yep.
Can't move that pawn forward anymore.
He's got to go.
Got to move elsewhere. The king. And again, he's not going to move the king away. He wants to keep that advantage, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's my assumption of what you would do, right, Luke?
Yeah. The idea is you want it. That's the principle. You get the king to block his own pawn so you can meander your pieces closer.
Yeah. But now that we're there, I can continue with the plan of moving the king.
And now it's
king is there, then I've got it. Because
2 moves check. Yep. I mean 2 moves mate.
Yeah. But that's not what I did. I did that. Threw in the towel, advance, exchange, and a stalemate.
So I guess as we're concluding this, do you want to give just like a brief synopsis of your own takeaways as far as principles that you learned before analyzing these? Because for me, I know I mentioned about the doubling pawns overrated. That for me was a huge disadvantage in this game. I did not give myself the flexibility to really think outside the box of doubled pawns are bad. So that hurt me a lot. And I realized that about myself a lot. And also, it's important to allow concerns about defending against your king's attack plans to prevent you from, I mean, if I'm just focusing on defending against Tom's plans, I can't develop my own. And so I fell into that mindset pretty early on, which was really weird. And then also a hanging knight can be dangerous. Come on, Luke. Like that that was just crying out for him to push it at that time. And if I had followed through, which is one of the movies I mentioned I'll be studying earlier on, I could have utilized that awesome placement for the knight potentially if I can just get him to do something. And then the last thing I wrote down for my key lessons are pawn structure and calculation is crucial. If I had more clearly calculated my moves after move 40 when I had the opposition, as we talked about, I would have probably had a solid chance at winning. And ironically enough, now this is one of the few things I did peek at the chess engine for, but that was at the part where Tom and I just discussed. After I gave up that opposition, if I had moved it to the one crucial square so I could have check, pawn, queen before him, I would have had the game. And so I think that was for me one of my biggest, and all that to say, I don't know much about the Danish Gambit or the Gorian Gambit and all this stuff. I need to also learn a little bit more about those openings. Tom, take it away. Your turn.
Yeah. So the big one that I really took away right. I mean, this was as soon as we finished our video was God. I need to learn my end game with queen and pawns.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're gonna see so many games are get your queen to the other side before the other person, and once you get that queen, you win. But you have to know how to win with that queen.
Yep, exactly.
So that was one crucial takeaway for me. My other two were actually things that I felt like worked out well for me. That were principles that I had brought into this game that I just felt like were lessons that I learned that helped. One was conservative moves towards this center. I have a tendency not to do that, which kind of goes with my third one, which was don't suicide against the king. These are tendencies that I have as a player, and I am struggling not to do. I think some of my suiciding against the king comes from I've done a lot of like punching down in terms of my opponents throughout the years. And when you're doing that, it's very easy to just suicide against the king, because if you're playing against a weak player, they're not building up any sort of defense, so you can just charge right in. But if you're playing against somebody who is decent at chess, they're not going to leave their king undefended. They're going to see your attacks coming, and if you are giving up your positional advantage in the center with the intent of I'm just going to charge all out at this king, usually what ends up happening is your attack will peter out, and then because you've given away control of the center, the game turns and your opponent can gain control.
Yeah, well said. So in conclusion, we've now done the entirety of during the game, writing down what our thoughts and feelings were, and then taking all of that and then looking at the whole game to decide what were all the crucial points. And then finally, as we mentioned throughout this, we each chose 3 or so crucial points that we want to study further. So at this point, again, aside from a few things we've mentioned about chess engines, this is not something that we would have hit the books for yet. We would have not hit the chess engine. We would have not hit any of these things. This is just strictly us looking at the board and thinking through all the moves we did, what we were thinking at the time, and what we think afterwards. So now on the next video, we're going to continue this with the conclusion, and that is, after we've studied these crucial elements or crucial moments that we each chose, we're going to take them to chess books, chess videos, the professional realm, and we're going to now we've given what our key takeaways so far were, but by that time we will have really solid ground that we have gained in our overall chess knowledge, just because we've taken the time to actually go through what our thought process is and comparing it to you know, the actual like realm of chess knowledge out there. Um,
And on that, like, some of this is going to be repetition. Uh, for me, I say this because no joke, I got to, I was playing a blitz game today, and I got into this exact same position, Luke. Exact same position, having done it. And I knew what I needed to do.
yeah,
And I did say, okay, I need to get my queen down in front of that pawn. But admittedly, during my blitz game, I didn't have enough time to think about it.
yeah,
And as a result, I ended up timing out on the game and got a draw where I should have gotten a win.
yeah,
And it was just one of those things where it was like, I need to hammer this into my brain so hard that it's just automatic. I look at the board and I'm like, that's what my next move is going to be, because I've seen a queen pawn end game a million times.
yeah. And I guess in conclusion for what I was going to say, I'll just end with this. If you guys don't do, okay, I'll be completely transparent with you. This is the first game of my life, okay, that I've actually studied this much in depth for. And we're not even done yet. Like, all we did is study ourselves, what our thoughts were, and now we've you know, talked between the two of us. But like, this is how you actually improve. It's not, you know, exciting and glamour and everything. It's really just doing your homework and actually, it's, you know, if I'm playing piano, if I'm learning piano and I take a song and I play it, you know, 50 times, but I never brought it to my teacher, and then all of a sudden I show him and he's like, yeah, did you know that you're not playing this grace note right? And I'm like, great. And now I have to go back and like relearn it and unlearn. So the problem is, when I personally play a lot of games online, but I don't do what we're doing now, I actually get to a point where I'm not real. I can't see my weaknesses. And so it's only when we do something like this that's not super exciting to some at first. I guarantee you, as we improve, if you guys are implementing what we're doing, you will too. And it's not, this isn't a magic bullet here. It's just, we're actually wanting to take the effort to learn about the weaknesses of ourselves and understanding how to improve it next time we recognize something like that.
I think the analogy that you gave with the piano is it's so beautiful, because, like, as somebody who also is really bad at the piano, um, the idea when you practice, people who are really good at the piano, they will take a piece and they will slow down the tempo. They very, very slowly, because they want to make sure they're getting every note exactly right within the tempo. And it's not glamorous.
No.
There's a lot of practicing scales. You want to make sure all of your scales and all of your arpeggios are exactly right, which is really analogous to like practicing these end games. Like, you want those scales to be so down pat that you're never going to screw it up because you've done it a million times. The very easy thing to do when you're practicing the piano is sit down and play a piece. And I am so guilty of that. I sit down, I just play the song that I play, one of the 5 songs that I know, play it as fast as I can, and I'm like, boom, I got through it, and I did okay, and it sounded recognizable as a song, good enough. But that's not helpful to get better. To get better, you really need to slow it down, and you need to pick apart the difficult things so that we get better at the things that are harder for you.
Yes. Well said. Well said. So guys, if you, I promise you that if you track with us through this process and you implement this stuff, we'll try to get some videos up where we kind of more address exactly specifically what we're doing, what it looks like, some examples. But like, if you do this, you will improve. We're doing it. We're going to improve as well. So I'm really excited about this. And next time we meet, we will have come away with, we're going to take it to the teacher, and we're going to find some of the things we may, even between the two of us here, we may have been off, or it may have been misaligned in our focus. Either way, it's going to be really rewarding when this process is finished. And now we'll never think of the same positions the same way. Even if there's one or two things we take away from this game, it'll dramatically improve our chess throughout the rest of our career. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this with us. Again, if you've been tracking us, with us the whole way through, don't let it stop there. Do this yourself, and you will find that you'll be improving with us too. Any last words, Tom?
Oh, I think that's great.
All right.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.